incarnate! Transfiguration! The hunt is on!
Clouds high. The birds call.
Bring it! Letting great names echo! Do your master's bidding! Unleash! Ha! You're stuck now!
Falling leaves. Adorn my night. Wind strike.
Let the mountain's veins boil! Got something for it. By ordinance divine, my will embodied. This is a new one.
With Skirk's release, we also have a Shenhe rerun incoming, so naturally the big question is, should you get her? Shenhe is basically Cryo Yunjin. She buffs Cryo characters with a flat damage buff for all Cryo damage. So, if you don't like Cryo, you definitely should skip her. If you do love a Cryo DPS, like for example me and Aloy, then I think she's actually kind of worth it. But at the same time though, even as an Aloy main, I don't use her that often. She's strong, but she's just really niche. So let's get into what Shenhe does. But first, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be getting Skirk live on stream on both YouTube and Twitch, and so if you like the video and ring that bell icon, you can be notified of the latest videos and live streams on the channel. Now, what Shenhe does is that she has her skill, which has two versions. The tap skill gives 5 quills and a 15% skill ult damage bonus. The hold skill is 7 quills and a 15% normal attack, charge attack, plunge damage bonus. On top of that, we also have her burst, which is a 15% cryo resonant shredding field. So that's of course pretty nice. It also does some additional cryo damage as well. And then finally, we also have those quills that I just mentioned. They're basically flat damage that is scaled based off her attack. This is of course consumed per hit from your characters. Think of it as a base damage increase that will then be affected by damage percent and crit. And it's because of that she's actually a dedicated Aloy support. Because what does Aloy do? She actually has a normal attack that can be buffed by quite a lot of damage percent through her coils, which can get up to 47.6%, and then of course from Ice Rush, the passive from her A4, which of course can ramp up to 35%. On top of that, Aloy has an A1, which gives 8% attack to the team, 16% of course to herself. And that A1 is useful for Shenhe because Shenhe's quills, they don't snapshot attack, which means if you get an additional attack on Shenhe, then yeah, those buffs are getting buffed further as well from her quills. The only real teams that I tend to play Aloy with Shenhe though are basically Freeze and Frostloy. They work really well in those teams. But with French Loy, I would have to swap out Kaz with Jean, so it's a little bit more difficult to get that bomblet grouping. And with Melt Loy, I think it's a write-off because that ult field with the additional cryo damage ends up killing and or replacing the Pyro Aura, which is not what we want to do. And then Burn Loy does actually work though. It's just that there's not enough team slots in that team in order to fit someone like Kaz, so you end up with no bomblet grouping, which kinda sucks. With other cryo characters, because not everyone plays Shenhe with Aloy, well, let's just quickly go through. With Ganyu, like Ganyu can work with Shenhe, it's just that her charge attacks hit so hard that the quills don't really matter all that much. At least, I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you have a disagreement with that. With Eula, I just want to mention that Eula is physical. I have seen some people play Eula with Shenhe. I don't think Shenhe is doing anything for Eula, so there we go. If you want to play a cryo spear character with Eula, you do have Mika, but I would actually recommend C6 Rosaria instead. Meanwhile, we have Ayaka, who is a strong synergy with Shenhe because in a lot of Ayaka rotations, apparently you can fit in 2 uses of Shenhe's tap skill to boost pretty much 10 hits of her 19 hit burst. Obviously, if you're attacking AoE characters, then in that case, the quills will just go like that. Otherwise, the teams that you tend to play with Ayaka tend to include quite a lot of damage percent from characters like Shilinen, Farina, etc. And then of course, with the way you build Ayaka, you tend to have a lot of crit value in her build, which of course is really useful for Shenhe's quills. And then we also have Wriothsley, who doesn't really do that much with Shenhe. Like, Shenhe will be a great option in a lot of Wriothsley freeze teams, but unlike Aloy, who has a lot of damage percent in her kit, Wriothsley only has damage percent for his very special charge attack. No, not his skill, that's a talent upgrade, or rather a talent multiplier bonus, not a damage percent, so it doesn't actually affect the Quills. And then finally we also have Skirk, who has no damage percent buffs in her kit as far as I can tell, but once again, like Ayaka, her teams will have quite a fair bit of damage percent, specifically from either Yelan or Farina, because you can't play Yelan and Farina together with Shenhe and Skirk, because otherwise you won't have a healer. So it's specifically either Farina or Yelan. That's the damage percentage you're getting from Skirk. Of course, though, in a Farina team, Skirk will probably be using something like Marashosei, so you also get that crit value on Skirk, which can be very, very useful for Shenhe's Quills. Basically, she's really good with Aloy, she's fantastic with Ayaka, and she's probably going to be perfectly fine with Skirk. Apparently, she is going to be one of the solid alternatives for the final slot of the Skirk team. Now, when it comes to building Shenhe, she's actually really straightforward. The weapon that we're going to be using is Favonius. That's basically it. That's like literally the only weapon that most of us will be using. For the few of us who somehow have enough ER on our Shenhe build, Calamity Queller is perfectly fine. Engulfing Lightning might actually be the most hilarious option that isn't Favs. Otherwise, if you're playing a DPS Shenhe build because your name is Gay as D-Hout, then you may want to consider a Primordial Jadewing Spear. If not that, because you're overcapping on crit rate or you don't have it, Calamity Queller is a perfectly fine option. Otherwise, other DPS 5-star spears would be the basic idea. Otherwise, when it comes to artifacts, well, Noblesse is pretty much the way to go for all support Shenhes, but not everyone has a good Noblesse set. So you may want to consider running a 2-piece attack, 2-piece ER, or 2-piece attack. Yeah, that's if you're desperate, okay? Try to get a Noblesse build. Basically, that's all I'm telling you. Scroll is a choice. It doesn't really work that well, so I don't really recommend it myself, but it's a choice. If you're playing DPS Shenhe, you may want to consider Blizzard Strayer or Marashosei. And finally, when it comes to your artifact stats, first off, you may want to get around about 200 ER. I had a build that had 150 ER and it sucked. So you may want to get that 200 ER because in order to make Shenhe actually be more useful than, let's say, Rosaria, apparently you need to be using her ult on the regular. Otherwise, the main stats that you may want to try and get is triple attack, but that's what I had before and I only had 150 ER, so that's why that sucked. And ER sand does mean that your buffs are less, but look, there is a notable damage difference, but it's not huge. And then finally, when it comes to playing a DPS build, yeah, you may want to go for attack, cryo, crit, but I've heard that apparently an attack goblet might be better in the DPS Shenhe teams of today because Escoffier exists, who might end up doing more damage than your DPS Shenhe anyway, in which case, yeah, you may want to consider running an attack goblet instead. And finally, let's have a look at Shenhe's constellations. Now, real quick, you don't need any of them, and maybe one, if not two of them, are actually very useful. So the first one is going to be C1. This is, of course, an extra skill charge. It does mean that you don't have to preload your first use of your tap skill in an Ayaka rotation. You can actually just put them together in a much more nicer way, I guess. C2 is plus 15% cryo crit damage, which is absolutely pathetic. For reference, C2 Shilinen is plus 60% crit damage for all cryo characters damage, whereas with C2 Shenhe, you also get 6 seconds on the ult duration, which is probably the nice part, but yeah, that's basically it. With C3, that's skill levels, good. C5, ult levels, unless you're playing DPS Shenhe, mostly useless. C4 is a boost on the next use of Shenhe's skill. It is a Shenhe personal damage buff. So if you don't care about Shenhe's personal DPS, this is worthless. And finally, let's just quickly talk about C6 Shenhe, because it is actually an Aloy constellation. It is infinite normal attack Quills. If your skill or your ult end up using up the Quills that they would normally use up, you do end up losing that infinite normal attack Quill buff. So that's why this is actually an Aloy constellation, 100%. Alright, Shenhe is very, very niche, but at the end of the day, she's still pretty good if you play her with some particular cryo characters. She is getting some attention with Skirk's release, but who knows, maybe she might be meta whenever the Sarita comes out. Let me know what all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about Shenhe, and are you going to get her? Probably after Skirk. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you liked this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Right now.